unpacking today's headlines. This is Souls and Liberty in Depth.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to In Depth, brought to you by MyPillow.com and Real Estate for Life. My name is Claver T. Kamau Imani, sitting in for GMV Gary Michael Boris, feeling a bit under the weather today, so I'm coming in off the bench. And if I'm going to come off the bench, I'm going to be a substitute today. It couldn't be a better day, because on the set with me is a very, very dear friend, Tracy Shannon. You can find her work at madmamabear.com. We had a lot to talk about. And I brought Tracy in today because, well, we're right smack dab in the middle of Pride Month. And I wanted to bring someone in who can explain to you how absolutely devastating that type of lifestyle can be. It has impacted her family greatly, the neo-morality movement. Her story you're going to find absolutely enthralling. The work that she does you're going to find edifying and encouraging. So sit back, don't go anywhere. We got a lot to talk about. You're going to learn some things today that you perhaps never understood was going on in your backyard. One of the things that that Tracy and I incorporate in our political activism is the defense of liberty begins in your own backyard, and Tracy lives that. Sure, we talk about bringing conservative values, Judeo-Christian values to Washington, D.C., and that big dome building up there, but also the pink dome building in Austin. City Council downtown, County Commissioner's Court, the various municipalities that surround the Houston area that orbit us in the different counties, and certainly in our school districts where the neo-morality movement is an absolute danger to the integrity and the mental health of our children. Tracy, welcome so much. Thank you for being here. Welcome to In Depth and Souls and Liberty.
Well, thank you for having me on, Claver.
Let's start with, we've been knowing each other now for almost 20 years. It started back in the Tea Party, and it was a whole different mission for us back then. But right about the time the Tea Party was launching in 2008, 2009, 2010, what many of us did not know is that you were going through an extremely traumatic, dramatic period in your home life. You were on the verge of becoming what we're terming on today's program a trans widow. You're not trans, by no means.
Right.
You're all woman, as your shirt says, woman. But what happened?
So after 15 years of marriage and 3 children together, my first husband decided he was going to pursue life, identifying and pretending to be a woman, going through medical and surgical transition. And so, of course, that was the catalyst for our divorce. And we had problems in our marriage with relating to cross-dressing going on from shortly after the birth of our first child. And we went to see a therapist, but I did not realize he had been seeing this therapist behind my back before he brought me to her. So thinking we were going to have marriage counseling, I'm there to participate, and she told me I was closed-minded and that I should be letting my husband go on these weekend trips with other men and where they would cross-dress and do activities together, that he should have his own P.O. box where he would get women's catalogs and women's magazines so he could practice and get ideas, I guess. And if I didn't see it, then out of sight, out of mind, it shouldn't bother me. So it'd be okay if he would have this secret life that I didn't see.
This therapist was not there to help bring your husband to spiritual and mental healing, but absolute opposite, to affirm the sickness and say that your faith, your belief system, which lines up biblically, was wrong, that you're wrong.
Right. And she asked me like where I went to college because in her view, I guess I couldn't have been educated well or indoctrinated well if because I didn't agree with this. And he and I had gone to the same university, so it wasn't that. It was just a different in commitment and moral values. And for me, I don't think putting self-fulfillment ahead of the marriage commitment or the commitment to the children is the proper thing to do. But this therapist, she was in Houston, and she's still working here today and doing the gender-affirming care business. She's written a book to tell parents how to validate their children who identify as transgender. She actually told me that I was probably a lesbian. I mean, she was very determined to try to convince me to go along with this in some manner or another. And I think we both know that lesbians, that a lesbian couple doesn't involve certain anatomy, male anatomy, and so that would be an impossibility. So I just couldn't believe what was happening. I was so run over by the whole process. When we eventually got divorced, even just feeling like it seemed obvious that this was wrong. But even in Texas, my husband could change his name and his sex identifier on his documents before he even went to court. So, surprise, I'm divorcing a so-called legal woman in court. I had married a man, and the records will all be changed so that nobody can ever track the man that's on the birth certificate for my children. I just couldn't believe this was all happening in Texas, and for over a week in court, every day there was pressure for me to use the preferred pronouns. So this is back in 2010. So
this is even before Oberfeld.
This
in
is
2015.
Before,
this is
before Bruce became Caitlin, and so I just thought it would be very obvious that what's right for the kids. They shouldn't be around this at all. But I was incorrect in presuming that the courts would realize this is not in the best interest of the children. Instead, they gave extended visitation, which meant like not just first, third, and fifth, but a night during the week, and the visitation is extended on the weekend, so they return like on Monday morning or something. It's just was a lot of time to take in my opinion, the stable parent and the parent who'd been the most involved in the care of the children, which was me. So, I just couldn't believe this could happen, that this legal fiction was taking place, and that I could possibly be held in contempt of court for calling my husband and father of my children a man in court. And that we had to run up legal fees even to argue about this, in my view, was just ridiculous.
I mean, the thing about it, this whole Pride Month thing, and a lot of people in other parts of the country, because we do have a national and an international audience, would think that in Texas, below the Mason-Dixon line, in the Bible Belt, no way, no how that this stuff goes on. It's everywhere. It is absolutely ubiquitous. It's even right here in Houston, even in Texas, where you have some of the largest churches. I mean, Houston has over 5,000 churches in it, and the problem persists even here. And it's been going on, like you said, this is 2008, 2009. Before you guys got married, you and your ex-husband, did you have any indication at all that he was mentally ill like this, spiritually and mentally ill?
No. We met in youth group, so absolutely not. And we had a lot of things in common. I didn't think we would have my wardrobe in common, but we did have a lot of shared interests, and we had very nice and fun dates together, and our beliefs all lined up together. And I wouldn't ever have imagined any type of infidelity, to our marriage and to our family. I never would have imagined that happening.
It went beyond just the clothes then. I mean, he was seeing other men.
Women. women.
Other women.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't think there were men. There could have been in the early stages. There were definitely men that he went out with that they were all dressed up as women to go like do things. But I don't know if they were romantic or not. Just some things happened. And
did he really start off by like raiding your closet, or did he actually go out and shop for himself, or
both?
Do you guys wear the same size? I mean,
at some point in our marriage, when we were newlyweds, we were probably very similar to the same size. I mean, he was maybe a little bit bigger than me in some areas. I know when my first pregnancy, I probably weighed 120 pounds when I got pregnant with my first baby. So like when I started to expand, I wore his jeans until I got maternity jeans. So we were close in size. I mean, he's not a really tall guy, but he's taller than me. So but I would notice things were stretched out,
Really?
Yeah. So I think, wow, I lost weight until I, kind of found out things. There were signs. There were things that he looked at.
When did it come out into the open? What happened? I mean, how did it just like, boom, it's in your face? I mean,
the cross-dressing,
it was a little, a little here, a little there, but then all of a sudden there's the big reveal, if you will. How did that happen?
Well, there were two reveals in our marriage. The first one was right after the birth of our first son. So my son was in the hospital at 3 months old, very sick, nearly died. And he came up to see me and he shared with me that, well, I've always had a problem with cross-dressing. And I don't remember if he said problem, for him in that, but basically sharing there was a history. So I suggested go see a counselor, and he brought me to the one that I mentioned before. And so that was the first reveal. And so from that point on until the end of the marriage, so we had like another 11 years of marriage after that.
Wow.
It was always kept secret, and there might be times where I would find...
How did you do that? I mean, the level of patience and tolerance and the strength it must have taken, and the scars you had to be enduring.
I just put it out of my mind a lot of the times. Like he dressed up as in this like pregnancy belly one time, complete with water balloons for breast. No, it was very traumatic for our son, who was then 4 years old. My son actually destroyed that thing with a pair of scissors one day and said he just didn't like his dad doing that. And when he did that, he'd say he was doing that for me to understand, my experience better. And of course, you've seen like on talk shows these pregnancy belly things and men saying, I want to see what you're experiencing as far as the weight, Right. But he's saying, I'm doing this for you and I'll do all your chores. Well, this was just an avenue for him to, my chores, but it was just an avenue for him to cross-dress openly in our house. And another time after the birth of our third baby, he tried to convince me that he could breastfeed our daughter. And I don't know if he ever tried, attempted to actually do it, but I suspect he probably did. He was really, really trying to convince me to let him do that and that it was possible. I didn't know at the time that men with this particular fetish, and
that's what you're calling it. You call it a fetish.
I'm calling it a fetish, autogynephilia, which is it's a fetish where men feel aroused at the idea of themselves as a woman. And so that was one of the times that came up. That, of course, it didn't register with me. This was like a fetish or anything. I just thought, you are crazy. Like, if I want help, but not that kind of help. And I just told him, never bring it up again, or I will divorce you. So it didn't come up again. And there were times where I found that he'd been cross-dressing, but I didn't really always walk in on him or see him fully dressed. I mean, one time I walked in on him, he was shaving his legs, and he was in a state of arousal. So that's how another clue that I knew that this was more than, my gut instinct the whole time was this was something like pursuing an elusive other woman that's himself. I always felt that it was sexual whenever it was happening in our marriage. I didn't feel like it was something that for him was meditative or, like a form of relaxation. Like I was being told it was a form of relaxation for him.
Some sort of hobby or something.
Oh, I just need to relax. You've been stressing me out, Tracy. You've not been very nice to me, so therefore I had to do this. Or you weren't having sex with me, so therefore I needed to do this to relax myself. So when I discovered him in the state of arousal that time, that let me know that, there was this element of sexuality to it for him. So, but how did I deal with it? By totally stuffing it down, focusing on the children. I was a stay-at-home mom. I loved being home with my children. Those years, despite the just the constant pain of being married to someone who didn't prioritize my feelings, were some of the best years of my life, being home with my kids. Beautiful years, their innocence. They didn't know about their dad. The light in their eyes was still there, and they were happy, and I was, for the most part, happy. I wasn't happy with my marriage and longed for it to be better, but I was praying and hopeful that he would prioritize God and our family.
And all this time, Tracy, there were moments when you and I and others were working together on political projects and putting rallies together and speaking publicly and, going door to door, doing street work and working on various campaigns and going to Austin. And I didn't have a clue about this. Nobody knew this was going on. Did any of our closer friends, our political allies, more than just political allies, some of our friends, maybe some of our lady friends, were you able to reveal this to them, or you just had to keep it on the down low until you had the courage to let everybody know? You've always been rather transparent.
I had one friend that I talked to that was in the whole, remember the 9/12 movement?
Yeah.
So you might remember Patriot Shar.
Oh, yeah.
So
the late Patriot Shar.
Yeah. So, yes.
Well, she was a character.
Before anybody, I talked to her about all of this, and she was, trying to support me with prayer and just, talking to me like, don't make any of my own mistakes. Don't answer fire with fire. So, just encouraging me to stay, faithful to my husband, which was not a problem, and, trying to stick it out, but also, when it came time, this was a decision I had to make, but, helping me and supporting me, it was time to leave. And of course, I don't know if you remember my friend, Rhonda. So Rhonda, she was supportive, and both Rhonda and Shar were there like every day during my court proceedings, supporting me. So both in prayer and just emotional support. So there were some of our friends that did know kind of late stage what was going on and why I had to step away from activism and for a while and really just focus only on the kids because they needed someone who was putting them first and as their only focus.
Yeah, and you just leaned in on being a mother, a great mother, and now a grandmother as you are. And guys, I wanted to bring Tracy on once again because it's Pride Month, and the neo-morality movement and homosexuality is nothing to be proud of. And Tracy's story is Exhibit A of why we should not be celebrating these aberrations, these abnormalities of mental health and spiritual illness as well. MadMamaBear.com is her website. The investigative journalism that she does, the groundbreaking investigative journalism that she does on this subject matter, the neo-morality movement, is astonishing. And I would encourage anyone, regardless of whether this is touching your family or not, if you just want to be well informed about this world, how this space, how it exerts power and influence in pretty much every aspect of our lives, MadMamaBear.com is a fantastic website for you to go and to look at. Now, one of the things that you did, you were one of the first ones to focus in on the drag queen story hours at libraries here in Houston, before it came really a national topic, you were able to find out what was going on here. And it wasn't pretty. It was quite a battle. It was warfare. Our good friend Doc Green actually had a heart attack after being illegally detained. Just give us an overview of that era, because it's still going on across the country, but it was right here. Texas was leading the way. Right here in Houston, Houston was leading the way in the stupid drag queen story hours in our public libraries.
Right. So I always call it Mayor Turner's Drag Queen Story Hour, the former, now deceased mayor, because his whole office was involved in running that program. So I found looking in there at all of the drag queens that are participating in that these weren't the best role models for children. There were prostitutes, there were pornographers, BDSM dominatrix for hire, and two people with a history of sex offending.
Now we're talking
Children.
about, now look, guys, what we're talking about here, the performers in the libraries that are supposed to be reading to the children, innocent advocates for the lifestyle. Tracy and her team went in and found out, did background checks, and these guys were absolutely criminal. They were dangerous to children.
Yeah, two of them had a history of sex offenses against minors. One of them had the record expunged, but that involved 4 minors. And then the other had sex offense against an 8-year-old boy. And they were both involved in aspects of the Drag Queen Story Hour in Houston. And then beyond that, just that you would hold out transsexuals that have a history in prostitution and pornography and BDSM dominatrix.
You found their records.
Yeah.
You found their records. Mm-hmm. And then you also knew their stage names. Mm-hmm. And then you also found their legal names. And you were able to find that they were engaged in these aberrant behaviors and had been charged and convicted of them.
Right. And these men were following women and children into the ladies' room in the bathroom. So these are people who just don't have the natural respect that you should have for boundaries. And that's why that's important. We're talking about boundaries and why they're important. So often, just like the case with my ex, just lacked the appropriate boundaries. And these men lack the boundaries to know what's appropriate for children and that it's not appropriate to go into the women's restroom when you're a man.
We're going to take a break real quick, Tracy, to talk about our good friend Mike Lindell at mypillows.com. I mean, come on, guys. The commercials are everywhere. But Souls and Liberty is very fortunate that Mike Lindell, friend of the show, friend of the organization, a friend of Redemption Media, is supporting us. And if you support Mike Lindell and you go to mypillow.com and get any of those fantastic products, get them while they last, as he says, you want to use the promo code Souls and Liberty to get even more savings. Souls and Liberty. Use that promo code. But Mike Lindell is a friend of In Depth, of Souls and Liberty, of Gary Michael Voris, and so we encourage you to be a patron of Mr. Lindell, who is a patriot. MyPillows.com, a supporter of Souls and Liberty, and bringing you In Depth. Today with yours truly, Claver T. Kamal Imani, sitting in for the GMV, Gary Michael Voris, a little bit under the weather, and my guest is my good friend, a lady that I absolutely adore. She's a hero, heroine to me, Tracy Shannon out of Northwest Houston. Tracy, getting back to the drag queen story hour in the libraries, but this space, do we know who started? How did this launch? The whole library thing. Do we know who instituted it? What was this inception?
There was a two people, a man and a woman. They're young, and one of them's mother worked in the library at the Freed Montrose Library, and
in the neighborhood.
Yeah, in the neighborhood, and
and they call it the neighborhood, so this is not a slur. They call it themselves the neighborhood.
And this couple, or they're friends, or like best friends. It's like a gay man, and then his friend, it's a woman. I don't know what her sexual history is or whatever, but they're friends, and they have a band. It was called the Space Cadets, and they're kind of an LGBTQ, friendly, or in the community they're known, and so they were the sponsors of that. They were the ones doing the event. And then the Space City Sisters got in on it, which those are the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence here in the Houston area. So they look like nuns, and they wear that white makeup. They're like mocking the Catholic Church. So they were involved, and that's how that got started. And it was just a few people going to Drag Queen Story Hour in the beginning. And then the Catholics started showing up and protesting before anybody. So there was a group of devout Catholics, traditional Catholics from various different...
Did you have a role in that, being Catholic yourself?
I wasn't Catholic at the time.
You was not Catholic at the time?
No,
right.
But I became friends with a lot of Catholics during the time that I was protesting Drag Queen Story Hour. So it was the beginning of me wanting to learn more about the church. But there were these devout Catholics always protesting very peacefully, praying a rosary out there. And the Tradition Family Property is another group that was out there holding signs and leading rosary rallies. They're the group that brings the bagpipes. Very cool. So so that was going on. And so after a few trips to City Hall to talk about why this isn't appropriate, and being basically, they made the insinuation that we were all homophobic, I decided that I was going to go ahead and just show them, rather than tell them, why Drag Queen Story Hour is inappropriate for children. Because, I had told them it's filled with kink and erotica and prostitution and drug use, and that just wasn't enough. They still just thought we were opposing this simply because we're homophobic Christians, and there was actually some derogatory remarks made about the Bible by one of the council members. And so that's when I decided, well, we'll just do a dossier on these drag queens and show them that, what kind of people they're holding out as role models for these kids. And that's how we put down a lot of Drag Queen Story Hours across Texas.
I want to encourage you once again to go to madmamabear.com. I wouldn't encourage your minor children to go there, because Tracy, the information that she posts on madmamabear.com, it's for adults, but it's for your education, so that you know exactly what's going on right under your nose in your backyard. And then once you began exposing what was happening at public libraries, being funded, taxpayer-funded public libraries, you saw this space began to grow into individual businesses, where they would have drag shows at businesses in which they would advertise it as family-friendly, and you'd have little girls, little boys in there, 4 or 5 years old, watching drag queens do some of the most awful things in businesses.
Right, and in schools. And so we've protested, and either led by me and now other organizations led by Mama Bears across Texas have picked up on the way to do this, and they have followed my lead, and they are protesting and exposing what these drag queens are really about, and why they shouldn't be held out as role models for children, and why drag entertainment shouldn't be marketed to children in the manner that it's being marketed to children. But we also found that it was being promoted in public schools, and that they were bringing drag queens into public schools. We found one that was even brought in, and he had a history of prostitution on his record. And one of the teachers there guided him on how to skirt the background check, so that wouldn't be a problem. So we obtained the records. I did, and then my team obtained records and showing where the drag queen and one of the teachers bringing the drag queen in actually had conversations about me and how upset I was going to be when I found out about the drag queen story hour taking place at an elementary school. And they didn't just bring the drag queen, they also brought in a member of the LGBTQ community who was, I don't really know what her, what she identified as, maybe as a non-binary or a lesbian, but obviously these are not things that adults should be presenting to children. This is the area of parents to discuss according to their worldview with their children. And it definitely isn't helping our society to promote these ideologies and behaviors that have a deleterious effect on our culture.
A lot of people would think that Texas would not have these types of problems, but in fact, there are numerous independent school districts around the state where it's hand-to-hand combat when it comes to the presence of neo-morality within the classroom, within this. We're not talking about DEI or anything like that. We're talking about straight neo-morality in the hallways, in the classrooms, in the curriculum, pornographic books in libraries right here in Texas. That's part of the battle that you're fighting. These books are well known. This isn't just a Florida thing or a California thing or trying to fight it in New York. Right here in Texas, in our own backyard, we've got these issues. Talk about it, Tracy.
Right. The publishers and authors that are putting these books in schools are not exclusive to California. So it's very naive to think, well, this is Texas and it can't happen here. And I admit, when my children were little, I would say, I'm so glad we live in Texas. This is before I moved to Ohio for a few years. I was like, I'm so glad I live in Texas. This will never happen here. I used to read a pro-family website and all the things that they were fighting, and I'd think, well, we'll never have to worry about that in Texas. I was so wrong, because we are having to fight that here. And because we don't have in our laws yet, even though there have been some solid attempts to fix things in the Texas legislature, we never thought that we'd have to say, hey, sexually explicit content is not for kids, and then define what. I mean, we used to all have common sense.
And any actions that have been taken, they find some way to, schools find some way to circumvent it.
Somebody does, because, and it's the lawyers too that are running these schools, because there's some loophole and there's some, they think, like one of the excuses I was given and other moms have been given for having inappropriate content and sexual orthodoxy, LGBTQ propaganda in the schools is because we can't remove that, because that would be some type of form of discrimination. And of course, the Supreme Court of Texas just came down finally on our side saying, well, essentially, they aren't people, they're books, and we need to have what's appropriate for the children. That is not discrimination. And so we're starting to win this battle, but we have to close those loopholes in our state code. And because, like you just mentioned, the liberals find those loopholes. And education is run by liberals. And the lawyers in the education industry have been educated in liberal schools. And so, and they're trying to avoid lawsuits. And so here we have ACLU, who wants to sue every school district that doesn't allow kids to get on the internet, without filters. So, or they want to sue us because we remove a radical, they threaten to sue because we remove a radical trans ideologist therapist from our school district. They threaten to sue like that's discrimination, when it's not. Everything that we oppose were things that were on her website, things that where she was pushing as a resource for children, breast binders and packers, which are little, looks like a penis and scrotum. It's made of silicone. And that's for a little girl to put in her underwear so that she feels more aligned with the male sex. I mean, what kind of a sicko, advocates for...
It's a full industry.
Yeah. it's just disgusting, and these are good reasons. That actually creates a liability for a school district to have that type of professional, behind closed doors with children, where they may disclose, the child may disclose that they have a gender confusion to the therapist, and who knows what she would say to them. But we do know that her professional opinion, according to her own words, is if a child says that they're trans, then to believe them. And she also follows the latest guidance from the professional transgender organization that says, just ignore all these other comorbidities and pre-existing conditions. We're going to focus on the transgender ideology. So we're going to focus on the fact that they identify as something other than their biological sex, and we're going to affirm that. Regardless of whatever else may be going on, we're doing this. And so that, I think, is a very reckless approach. Regardless of what you think of trans ideology, that would be extremely reckless. I think affirming a lie is the absolutely wrong thing to do and leads kids on the path of destruction, both morally and physically.
Well, this is In Depth with Gary Michael Voris, and I'm sitting in for him. My name is Claver T. Kamau-Imani. This is Souls in Liberty. My guest today is Tracy Shannon. Her website is madmamabear.com. I would encourage you to visit and do some education, bone up on exactly what's happening in the neo-morality movement right here in your own backyard, right under your nose. Legislative session every 2 years here in Texas, up in Austin, under the Pink Dome. I know you were watching some bills this session. Perhaps you can give us an update when it comes to battling the neo-morality movement, battling pride. What did you find out? Do we have any victories, and what defeats did we have?
I feel like we didn't get the victories that we deserved. We're always told that we have the most conservative session ever.
Always.
Yeah, and it's usually just a few things that we got. Now, I think if we took it as a whole, there are some good things that came out of it. But this session, I mostly focused on the issue of gender fiction and removing that from our state code. So a little bit of progress was made, not as much as I would like, but one really great bill that passed, it was Valerie Swanson's bill. She's been really the main one hitting it out of the park with passing bills relating to the transgender movement to try to stall that in Texas. And so her bill was House Bill 229. And it's also called the Women's Bill of Rights, but it really is just a bill that full of definitions for the government code, defining what a woman is, defining male and female, mother and father, and for the purpose of record keeping in Texas, these definitions apply. So this is a good start. I don't really believe it does everything that some of the advocates and opponents say it does. And here's why. We still have other areas of our code that conflict with that. So, for example, our family code has in it, it says that a court order is sufficient to establish change of sex. So we still have, even though we have executive order.
That's another subject matter that rolls right into this, the legal documents.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Before Obergefell, we had Anise Parker, the mayor here in Houston. She and her lesbian partner went out to California to so-called get married, to come back and to give those benefits of a spouse to her. And then Obergefell comes along. This whole legal document has become another front line in this battle of being able to change your sex, your gender on your birth certificate and other documents.
Right. And if you can redefine what marriage is, which is man and a woman, if you can redefine that, then why can't you redefine what a woman is or what a man is? And that was the slippery slope. And of course, we've all seen that play out. And I don't say that because I harbor any ill will towards people who struggle with homosexuality or don't struggle with it, but have fully embraced homosexuality. But it's just that's the way it goes. It's a downward slope, and it's led us to the redefining of what a woman is. And this is not without consequence. It's not without consequence to families or for free speech. And I think this was framed by the right always as like a religious rights issue. Like people who are Christian are going to have a problem, with free speech. And I think that was a mistake. I think the mistake was not calling it what it is, which is a sin. And I think the mistake is saying, or even giving it an inch to the whole sexual rights movement, the sexual revolution, the neo-morality movement, which is defining, what sex exists for. And we all, I think, take a responsibility in that. But there's only one. Pride is not about all those things that have already been embraced, like the divorce rate and the devastation of marriage in our culture. Pride is about
rates.
Pride is about promoting all this sexual behavior outside of marriage and between, all types of people now, right? Because you have pansexual and everything else, and it's turned into a celebration of all types of debauchery. You've got actual abusive acts taking place out in broad daylight in some cities, and that's horrible. That's where we go whenever we get away from what is the true place for sex, which is marriage, one man, one woman, and the government has an interest in that. Why? Because that's the best place to raise children. Child rearing is best with one man, one woman. It's not a hateful thing to say. That doesn't mean that some people who have homosexual attraction wouldn't be a good parent. Maybe they would, but a child has a natural right to a mother and a father. And so we've gone away from rewarding, recognizing, and encouraging the traditional family. We are totally taking a wrecking ball to that in our culture with pride and with really the bottom line is adult fulfillment. Adult fulfillment has been prioritized above the traditional family, and it's had disastrous effects on our children. Why do so many children need mental health care now? They don't have a father, they're being raised by one mother, or they're being exposed to all this sexual stuff in school. Why? Because we have given a total nod to that in our society. A total nod. Because to do anything other than give all this hypersexual stuff a nod is to be a bigot or a pearl-clutching Christian now. And that's not the way it should be. But we need to have policies on the right that encourage procreation in a natural family, such as you have four children in a natural marriage, a mother and a father, encouraging them to stay married, not in abusive circumstances, obviously, but how about we don't abuse people and reward that? Like, how about you don't have to pay taxes when you have 4 children in a marriage that's lasting? How about that? Why aren't we doing things to encourage?
In a declining birth rate, a global declining birth rate. Right, we have a declining birth rate.
Right. And the state has an interest in having children who are raised properly, who are raised in an environment that brings them up mentally healthy, with a lower statistic of poverty, lower statistics of engaging in crime. And we don't do that. Why aren't we doing the things that make sense for our country and our culture here in America? Why aren't Christians advocating for that? It's kind of frustrating to watch people waffling around, tripping over pronouns and calling people like me some type of a bigot for sharing my story, which I only share to say, hey, maybe we're celebrating the wrong things. Maybe our empathy is being misplaced, and for women especially, maybe we're having our empathy weaponized against us so that we're giving up our spaces, we're giving up our awards, scholarship, business, women-owned business certification. All men can get those just simply by having their documents altered. And yes, there's an executive order in place now in Texas to stop that, but that's not enough. We should codify into law, just like Trump has some great executive orders, but they need to be codified into law. Correct. And our law should always reflect the truth and principles that support traditional family and flourishing, human flourishing. And they're not. When in 2009, the entire legislature in Texas voted to put in the law that sex change is established by a court order. So that needs to be removed. And that didn't happen this session in Texas. We also had SB 406 by Mays Middleton. It died in public health. So all the bills died in committees led by Republicans. I mean, they just went there and died. I mean, without even a chance of getting out. So SB 406, it went to the House side and died. And that would have stopped the birth certificate changes. That would have codified that. So that would come into agreement with the executive order we got in Texas. So that died in State Affairs? No, Public Health by Gary Van Dever. And the other committee the other bills relating to getting public records correct, such as driver's license, died in State Affairs. Well, so who had State Affairs on the House side? So I can't remember who had that. Was that?
Well, nobody can look it up.
Oh, Ken King. Ken King. Yeah. So, and the prisons bill, that died in State Affairs. So that would say that bill would establish that men couldn't be in female prisons. And that's for... and
we're talking about Texas, y'all.
Yeah.
We're talking about bills in Texas, and you really need to understand the legislative process, how it happens under the Pink Dome in Austin. If you think Washington, D.C. has issues, if you think that all this crazy mess goes on in Washington State, in Olympia or in Portland or in Oregon or in Sacramento, Albany, you're wrong. We've got some serious problems in Austin. Going to take a break real quick with Tracy. We'll be right back with her, but I want to tell you about realestateforlife.com, a supporter of Souls and Liberty and the in-depth program. Now, Real Estate for Life, this is a really great program. Get in contact with them if you're in the real estate business. You're looking to purchase, you're looking to sell, you're looking to invest. If you use one of the Real Estate for Life brokers, if you use that brokerage, those agents, they take a portion of their commission and they donate it towards pro-life charitable organizations, the pro-life movement, with no cost to you. They do it out of the goodness of their heart. So if you are in a state of real estate transition, I need a real estate transaction, realestateforlife.com. Check them out. They are supporters of Souls and Liberty, supporter of In Depth. So why don't you support them, because they support life at conception. Back with Tracy Shannon. Tracy, we talk about the defense of liberty begins in your own backyard. I've put my name on the ballot before, and you've put your name on the ballot before, and most recently you took a run at Humble ISD. And there's a lot of controversy about that particular race. It's crazy. Why don't you get us up to speed on that? You wanted to try and battle some of these things from an influential position, being on the actual school board to protect our children, educate our children properly, and it's been a mess. Right. I mean, just the way school boards are run in Texas. The school board is a rubber stamp for everything that comes in front of them, and there's not much transparency. Unfortunately, we have a great attorney general, but transparency isn't so great in the attorney general's office. So we still need to improve on that in Texas. And without transparency, you just can't have very good accountability. Because that's one of the big problems. How do we support teachers? How do we support the students better and maintain parental rights in our school districts? Because parental rights are being undermined all the time, and I think parents are too busy to realize that that's happening. So those are some of the reasons that I wanted to run. And to, obviously I'm just one vote on it, would have been one vote on the board. Couldn't accomplish everything, but I would have been bringing these things to light, such as, the need for better policy to make sure that the integrity of the sex-segregated spaces aren't being violated, because they need to be respected. I think that makes everybody feel safer in the school environment when those spaces are respected.
there's discipline issues in our schools. They're not really disciplining the kids when they should be. So, yeah, I wanted to bring my fight from the sidelines to the front lines, and not just all about the neo-morality movement, because the school board is about much more than that. A lot of business just isn't being done correctly. We're spending money on programs that are ineffective and burden teachers. And just like a couple of weeks ago, our board and Humble ISD passed increased spending from $75,000 to $750,000 a year for a program called Capturing Kids' Hearts. And this program, it's just like 4 rules on what teaching a teacher and students. Like, here's what the rules are and there's 4 questions. Here are the 4 questions. What's the rule? Did you break it? How do we feel about that, or what do we do about that? It's dumb. We don't need to spend $750,000 on a program that's been studied and is shown to be ineffective. It may change perceptions, but it doesn't really, and it may change referrals for discipline. That's only because the teachers are being told, well, did you ask those 4 questions? Did you ask them correctly? Did you use the right tone of voice? But we're just doing the wrong things. And I wanted to be part of turning that around, because I think the academics come up whenever you stop spending money and energy on all this fluff that doesn't do anything, because education gives these kids the best opportunity they're going to have in life, outside of having 2 parents that love them and live in the same home with them. And so if you want to, the schools all want to talk about equity. The way you do that is give a good education. You want to make things better for those kids that have only 1 parent. Give them a solid education. You're not doing it with this fluff, this social emotional learning garbage that you're bringing in. And yes, that's in our TEKS, that's in our law that we have to do social emotional learning in Texas. They need to root that out, because it's just being used for all kinds of nonsense. Mm-hmm. It's educational grift, making people rich, and it's not helping the kids or the teachers. But it's in there, so do the very minimum. Don't increase to $750,000. So that's one of the examples of why I ran, because it's not just about the dirty books. We've removed a lot of the dirty books from the schools, but I did fight dirty books in my district. We were successful in removing a lot of those with the help of the administration. Most of the bad books were moved because they became aware of the problem. So that's why parents need to be involved. And I would encourage pastors to get involved. When I ran, I did an interview with several pastors from my district. They said they wanted to be involved and have influence, on what's going on in the school. They're aware of what's going on. Well, if they're aware, I never see them at the board meetings. Mm-hmm. I never see them weighing in, except for at election time. And I was very disappointed to find out that some of the pastors in my community told congregants not to vote for me and another candidate because we're Catholic.
So you experienced bigotry, you experienced religious discrimination right here in Northeast Houston, Harris County.
Right, absolutely. And it's just very disappointing to experience that, because, they weren't looking at my qualifications and what I would bring to the board and what I would do for the parents, children, and teachers of that district. They don't want to talk about that. They want to say, you don't worship the way that we want you to worship, or that makes us uncomfortable. Therefore, you can't have our support. And the other candidate, she also did not win, and she would have been great on the board as well.
And this is one of the reasons why I'm so proud of Souls and Liberty, is because although it is very much Catholic oriented, we are an ecumenical media organization. We do not believe in religious bigotry at Souls and Liberty. I'm sorry that happened to you, Tracy.
We just can't be dividing the body of Christ like that. I just think that was it was just so disappointing to see from my community. And they don't show up at the school board, and I wish they would show up and give voice to their concerns.
But I don't understand, because with your resume, with your curriculum vitae, with your record of activism, Protestant, Catholic, regardless of the denomination, it seems to me that they would have glommed onto you and done everything they possibly could, because you've taken the stripes, you've taken the cat o' nine tails.
And not to mention that our school district brought in Memorial Hermann Healthcare into our district, voted it in, and the man I ran against was the incumbent, voted for that. And they've brought Plan B right into our schools. So now we've got kids in our schools who can go get Plan B. And, whether
turn the school into a pharmaceutical for abortion.
Yeah, so maybe it involves parental consent, or it doesn't matter. This shouldn't be happening in our schools. So we shouldn't be taxpayers, supporting this with their dollars or inside of our schools. So, and it may be funded by a foundation. Regardless, that shouldn't be in our schools. It's wrong to have that in our schools. And I would never vote for any entity that undermines parental rights, which Memorial Hermann was investigated by the Attorney General for undermining parental rights by preventing parents from seeing records of children age 13 and over. And I wouldn't vote for anything like that. And so it is disappointing. If the church is going to stand up, please come stand up in the board, the board meetings and give some direction to these board leaders. Please come pray for them, because they need it, because they're listening to lawyers who, and I'd say, apathy is one of the greatest forms of evil of our time. We're going to get sued because we have a fiduciary responsibility, or whatever the excuse is, to not protect children and their futures.
The tax-exempt status or whatever.
Yeah.
No, that's just cowardice. We're out of time, Tracy. There's so much more, especially in your race, the possibility of you may get seated. We didn't get a chance to talk about that because of residency requirements in the state of Texas when you do run for office. But people can go to madmamabear.com and stay informed with Tracy. See her on social media. That's Facebook, X. Are you on Instagram, anywhere else?
I'm on Instagram. I think I'm Ask a Trans Widow on X and Ask a Trans Widow on Instagram. Yeah.
Ask a Trans Widow. And just real briefly, your next project, anything you're doing investigatively that we should be on the lookout for?
I would just say keep your eyes open. I am working on something, but I'm not speaking about it publicly yet, but it's going to be a banger. Yeah.
Whenever she does reveal Saints and Patriots, let me tell you something. It's not a cartoon. It's not for entertainment purposes. It's to do damage for the cause of life, liberty, and prosperity. Tracy Shannon, madmamabear.com, a very dear friend of mine, a woman that I truly love as a sister in Christ, that's always been a hero of mine, that is always good to see you. And I'm going to have you back here on In Depth, Souls and Liberty. Want to thank our sponsors, mypillow.com. Don't forget, when you go to mypillows.com, use that promo code Souls and Liberty to get even more savings on whatever products that Mike Lindell has for you. And Real Estate for Life. Use them when you need to make a real estate transaction, and you will be helping the unborn. You will be battling against the industry of genocide, the industry of abortion. My name is Claver T. Kamal Imani, the Christian politician, the OG from the GT. Some people call me the Purifier. And from here in Houston, Texas, may the Lord Jesus bless you. See you next time.